G'day and welcome to this episode of the Team SFF show. First one for 2026. Mark Banasiak and Rob Borsak Jr. are back for another year to sit down and talk together about what's been happening. And get ready, we're going to lay things out for you after the recent Parliament craziness. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
All right, guys, welcome back to our first episode of Team SF podcast for 2026. Obviously, it's been a interesting end of 2025, and Chris Minns, pretty much pissed in everyone's Christmas punch with the firearms legislation that he brought down hastily, over Christmas Eve. Yeah, and now we've just seen Albanese essentially do the same thing at the federal level.
Yep. Have you recovered your sleep from those sitting nights?
Probably not.
Probably not.
I don't know how you catch up on 17 hours of debate, finishing at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's pretty rough. Nothing really constructive and sensible gets discussed at 3 in the morning, and we shouldn't we shouldn't be legislating at 3 o'clock in the morning, regardless of what the topic was. But there we were doing it. And it even got to a point where the opposition and the government were so pig-headed in their approach that they wouldn't even actually get up and put credible arguments to our amendments. They basically got up and said, "We'd like the bill out the way it is, and that's our response for all your amendments." And it's just like, so you don't have any credible arguments as to why we're trying to amend your poor legislation. It was that poor. We were trying to move amendments to properly describe and define what a magazine was in the legislation, because it didn't do that properly. So
and they ran them all together, right? Like at least the feds split the bills.
Yeah. Well, the Fed, look, Albo split the bills because he knew he had a problem in terms of the numbers. Minns didn't split the bills because he knew he'd perfectly wedged the opposition and the Greens. So he didn't have to split the bills.
Yeah.
Albo did.
Yeah.
So
and obviously, you're the politician here, I'm not. So there's probably questions people want to ask. So when it all went down, I think everyone found out the same way through the grapevine that there was a shooting in Bondi.
Yeah.
And then we all started getting our social medias flooded with it, and videos went around everywhere. And I think while everyone was in absolute shock, because this is something that was unheard of in Australia, basically. That kind of, it looked like something out of a war zone, didn't it? The streets of a city turning into a war zone. As firearms owners, it's something that we always have to live with, is that extreme worry all the time. Oh my goodness. So first there's shock, but straight away it's a shooting, and we all have that, that other feeling about ourselves, which is what is this going to mean for us straight away? And
because we know the immediate knee-jerk reaction is going to be to target the inanimate object, which is the firearm.
Yes. And
not look at the real issues, because it's easy from a political point of view, an optics point of view, to target law-abiding firearm owners, because you can easily identify them. They're licensed, they're documented, and you can create the perception that you are doing something to I guess, respond to that issue. And that's exactly what the Premier did. He chose optics over substance, essentially, and decided to focus largely on the firearms issue without fully identifying the problems that had occurred that led to this person getting a firearm when they shouldn't have.
Yeah. So going back to the timeline, as a politician,
Mm.
as a lawmaker, as someone who was going to be directly affected, because almost immediately we all knew they were going to recall
Yeah.
Parliament because it was that time of the year. They were never going to wait until after Christmas or February to do something. And us being the epicenter of it, like it only happened, 10 kilometers from Macquarie Street. So we're expecting them to do something rapidly. As a politician, as someone who was going to be directly affected, did anyone from the government reach out? Did anyone from police reach out? When were you briefed? When were you informed? When were you notified? And especially being, in the party that we're in, it's
Yeah.
obviously extremely relevant. Was there anyone asking any questions to you, or were they simply telling you with the rest of the MPs? What was that like?
Yeah, we received no special treatment at all.
Mm. No special courtesy
No
even?
special courtesy, no real response at all. We didn't get briefed on the actual legislation until probably the day before we were going into Parliament to start the debate on the legislation, and even that briefing was not very detailed.
It wasn't in person, was it?
It wasn't in person. It was obviously online. So we're all in our separate parts of the state, staring at each other over computer screens.
Which makes discussion very strange.
Yeah, this discussion very strange, very strained. Very tightly controlled. Um, and yeah, clearly there was clearly not enough consultation done. In our view, with us over the legislation, which is evident by how clearly poorly drafted and flawed it was.
Yeah.
To the point now that a lot of our constituents have genuine questions, and we can't give them full answers because the legislation is so poorly drafted. We've got to really, all the answers are hanging on the regulations, which is sort of our next fight in this whole regard. On top of dealing with how the federal legislation is going to impact law-abiding firearm owners, because it is, despite what the so-called Olympic pistol shooter up in Upper Hunter, Dan Repicoli, says, it is going to impact law-abiding firearm owners.
Definitely.
You just need to read the legislation properly.
Yeah. And just staying with that New South Wales timeline, because obviously we're in New South Wales, so it's highly relevant. You get briefed the couple of days before, and then you only get a briefing form on the legislation. You don't get the bill itself.
Don't get the bill itself until the bill is second read in the lower house.
Yep.
Then we get vision of it. Then we can start drafting amendments.
But they gave you a briefing copy when you got to Parliament?
No, we got essentially a rough draft of what the bill would entail, but not a full detail.
And usually,
well, Chris, our assistant, is chiming in from the cheap seats here. We may have received something that may have fallen off the back of a truck.
We know governments leak like sieves.
Yeah, it showed us a draft of the legislation, but we didn't have anything official until the bill was second read.
And under usual circumstances with new legislation, when there is a briefing, they have a copy of the legislation there ready to go, and you get to analyze that and then discuss that, and then they brief you clearly on what it is, and it's a question and answer.
Yeah, it's a much more stepped out process. So you'll have a bill briefing where they give you a 1 page normally, and it's all the highlights. It's all the good stuff they want you to see. It's normally introduced into the lower house and read. The minister gives a speech, and then at that point you can actually see the full details of the bill, and you can see that it's not all sunshine and lollipops, and you can start looking to make amendments. That process did not happen at all. It was just
extremely rushed
and contracted.
Looking at that draft, that briefing document, or whatever they're briefing you with, that straight away from your, we know there was no consultation beforehand. So who do you think drafted that legislation with what expertise? Who do you think it was?
Well, we know who drafts legislation. It's drafted by Parliamentary Council.
Yep.
They're a team of lawyers. They don't have expertise. in any specific field.
So they may have said, "This is what we want in the bill."
They would have been
You
given
go.
drafting instructions. This is what we want the bill to do.
Yep.
But that person that's drafting the bill doesn't necessarily have any expertise in firearms,
Yep.
or whatever the topic of legislation is about.
Yep.
And this is not a problem that's unique to this bill. We have that all the time.
Yeah.
When we want bills drafted for ourselves,
Yeah.
and we're having to really explain in great detail and almost in baby steps as to how this works in the real world.
Yeah.
And obviously, when we were drafting those 60 amendments, 60, 70 amendments, that's what we're having to do
Yeah.
with the drafter.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, so I hear what you're saying. The thing I'm trying to focus on is because we all know that based on, because obviously we'll never know how the true inner workings of government work in times like this, but they would, we saw the people that were out the front in the press conferences. So we saw how it was the premier, it was the police commissioner, the police minister. So it's within the realms of possibility that those three got their heads together, and those three were the architects.
More than likely, that's where the drafting instructions would have come from, and possibly their advisors that worked with them. That's probably where those drafting instructions came from.
So such sweeping legislation with such wide-ranging effects, and stuff that's shifting the paradigm of firearms in New South Wales again, was something that within the realms of possibility could be done by people that don't know anything about firearms and people in law enforcement.
Mm. Well, look, when you look at the legislation, they just essentially copied WA
Yep.
and took one off the cap because they wanted to, have the biggest balls in town, or biggest balls in the country.
But
that's essentially what they've done.
But they added their own twist by adding, like trying to give their own flavour or their own expertise by saying belt-fed shotgun.
Yeah, the old belt-fed shotgun.
Yeah,
that doesn't exist unless you play Call of Duty.
Yeah,
And that's where I think maybe their advisor was playing a bit of Call of Duty a fortnight the night before, and got a bit overexcited and worked that into his into his speech.
I'm sure they're regretting that, because that is a real case in point in the lack of expertise with whoever they consulted. If it was anybody, clearly they didn't consult anyone at all knows anything about it, because it doesn't exist. And that's obviously highlighted in my shirt. Shout out to Michael from Solace for giving us this shirt at a meeting the other night. So get your belt-fed shotty for drop bear season. Two things that don't exist: belt-fed shotties and drop bears. But yeah. So and then when it comes to actually going in the House, and the politicians have been given the legislation, and they're there to start talking, and it's all been lumped together, and emotions are high, and the politicians all want to do what politicians do. We saw this especially in the federal parliament, where they spend the first bit of their speech talking about themselves and sort of ramping up the emotion in their speeches. So they have to come to a decision right now, whereas we know that emotion has no place in good decision making. That good legislation should be done with consultation. And this is not me stepping on the tragedy at all. This is not me stepping on the racism or any of those things involved in Bondi. But if you want to come to a rational decision, you shouldn't, you shouldn't just ride emotion in your decision making, because it's level heads need to prevail.
Well, legislation should actually address the problem. And if you don't know what the actual problem is,
exactly,
how do you address the legislation?
Exactly. Lashing out at an easy target is not good governance.
And at the point of the time when the legislation was drafted and being debated, a lot of the issues around how these terrorists got there, or the father got the license, was still largely unknown. And then it's to the public, it's still largely unknown. As someone whose office deals with individual firearm advocacy day in, day out, and has done so for 7 years. In 7 years, I've never seen a license application take 3 years to adjudicate.
Yeah. There's a lot of anomalies there,
Yeah,
and
and
there's
that
a lot of questions
yeah,
which the public knew
that
pretty
can't be
quick.
explained, "Oh, the registry was just super busy, and that's what it was taking all the time." No, it wasn't. No, it
Yeah,
wasn't.
it's
We've never had a license application across our desk be adjudicated,
yeah,
uh, over 3 years. Anything over probably 10 to 12 weeks, we are saying to people, "There's something in your background
yeah,
that the cops aren't comfortable with."
yeah, and there's like all of these things. I'm sure they're doing their internal inquiries now, and they know exactly what happened.
Mm,
And I think um, good leadership is also showing transparency rather than closing ranks,
mm,
because your individual career is not more important than the people of New South Wales, the people of Australia. So if the people of New South Wales don't need to know who made the mistake, but we need to know if there was a mistake, because there's two problems there. If there was a mistake in, well, there's three really. If there was a mistake in process, you need to review your processes. If there was an individual mistake, then that person needs to be held accountable. And if there was a cover up, then that's worse than all of it
mm,
altogether. We know the history of police and corruption in New South Wales, that when they cleaned it up 20 years ago. We know when the Edwards case happened, how they found serious failings,
mm.
and there wasn't daylight shone on that.
No, no one was actually held
No,
accountable
yeah.
for those mistakes,
So that
and
that sniffs of a cover up,
mm,
of they wanting to protect someone in the police when that should not be how a public service operates.
yeah,
We should be know what the process that they got wrong and do that, because now in this case, within 3 days, we had we had well, someone had the kid's firearms license. Um, I'm sorry, his driver's license, so we knew who he was. And then people were accessing records who, I'm sure these are all leaks from the public service.
mm,
Good Samaritans wanting to blow whistles, but they couldn't do it in, like, how on earth did they get a photo of the guy's license? That means that one of the police officers must have allowed someone to take a photo or
mm,
something, which is, again, thank goodness for that, because if they closed ranks around all of this, we would know none of this. But there's all kinds of anomalies that people have questions about, and they need to be answered. Like, why under one government was he declined, as you say, for 3 years? And then when a new government with a new party comes in, suddenly he gets approved.
yeah,
So what happened there?
and that's why we've tried to push for the bill to be kicked off to an inquiry,
Yeah,
and we're gonna have that debate and discussion again when we come back in
yeah,
February as well,
and
and hopefully the Libs have grown a bit of a spine
yeah,
and will support that, but we'll see, because
yeah,
we can see and the federal sphere, they haven't, developed a spine. Um, yeah, so we'll see where that goes,
yeah,
I guess when we get back. But yeah, look, 17 hours, over 60 amendments,
yeah,
and they had no credible defense,
yeah,
or arguments for any of
yeah.
those amendments we were trying to put forward. So I guess our next fight is trying to get some sense put into the regulations to, um, make it less worse.
And we'll definitely talk about that. But just going back to the timeline and as things happen, I think the reason why people reacted so differently this time, and the reason why people have been so, especially online, they've been so um, critical of the response, and so critical of the leaders talking, and critical of actions that we're taking, were COVID brought on a whole new paradigm for leaders talking on camera and people being engaged online. We all hung off our phones every day for every press conference. We listened to every word that they told us about what we could do, what the current situations were. Like, we're taking our marching orders every day from the leaders, that I think they may have forgotten that people still have that. They've trained us to be hyper aware all the time. And we've had a bit of a break from that since COVID. It's been 5 years, but you've trained us all into super aware, super engaged people, because we had to be. And then something like this comes along, and we all flick that switch, and we're all super aware
Yeah,
again.
but I think also people had seen the climate, um, you know, changing over the last couple of years in terms of, the constant protests on the street,
Yeah.
the constant unrest, the tensions between communities growing and growing and growing.
Yes.
And then this happened, and the government's response was to blame the gun and ignore the hate.
Yeah.
And everyone's just like, no, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, we all could see that the tensions were building and something was going to happen. We didn't know what that something was going to be, but I think we could all sense that
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
something was going to explode.
Yeah.
Um,
But I just mean they had since COVID, let's say
mm,
4 years, 4 years of lackadaisical press conferences again,
mm,
where they get back into just talking in circles and platitudes and every word doesn't matter.
mm,
And then all of a sudden we've switched on that hyper focus again, which we learned in COVID, hanging
yeah,
off every single word. And you've got into a serious situation now, a crisis situation where you're giving press conferences every day.
mm,
And people aren't only noticing what you say, they're noticing what you don't say.
yeah,
And they have tons of questions that they want answered, which they weren't used to because the politicians went back to business as usual with just talking at
mm,
us and thinking we weren't paying attention. But now we're hyper focused again because this has really bad. Like this is not a temporary thing. They're moving quickly on things that are going to have permanent
mm,
ramifications, and that's why we all were a lot more hyper focused on what they were saying. Where when you make a slip up, like you don't say extreme Islam or you don't say terrorist extremism, or you don't say, people notice straight away and they think about why you're saying that, and they're looking at the analytics of what you won't say
mm,
and saying things like belt-fed shotgun. People, it's like, no, this is super, and we understand, like, their bullshit detectors are way better
yeah,
than they used to be. And it's, yeah, that's something that I think they weren't expecting. They weren't expecting us to be so hyper focused on that, and
yeah,
we're all on break.
yeah. And look, I certainly wasn't expecting John Howard to come out and say, "Look, the gun issue is a deflection."
Yeah,
I almost choked on my dinner
yeah,
when
yeah.
when he said that. I never thought I'd quote John Howard. Um,
And he was someone who crushed a lot of civil liberties with after 9/11, just like America did.
yeah, yeah. So that was, I think that only just added to, I guess, people being hyper aware
Yeah,
and I guess, um, wanting to question more,
yeah,
which is a good thing because people saw through it and said, no, look, it's not about the gun, it's about hate,
yeah,
and I think that actually helped us. Um, Even though we didn't necessarily win the vote on the legislation, I think that
yeah,
helped us, in terms of, the debate in the public sphere, about this,
yeah,
and continues to.
yeah.
So,
And this is unfortunately going to be their legacies, that they showed ineptitude. They Their own politics rather than good governance
mm,
got us in this situation, and they're punishing everyone else for their because
their failings, yeah.
because the buck stops with them. So they talk about the federal things, how these guys traveled and these guys,
Mm.
he got his license approved after 3 years and the son was on an ASIO watch
Uh,
list.
Now funding was withdrawn,
Yep.
uh,
And
budget cuts
the ASIO guy
over
was
this.
taken out of the Security Council. And so it's this, the laws that you had in place were told for so long were gold plated, were world class, some of the strictest in the world, and we like it that way, and that's why we don't have craziness.
Mm,
And then it happened anyway,
mm.
and they were clearly resting on their laurels way too much. We don't know how the inner workings of these
Yeah, but if you
bureaucracies
don't
work.
but if you don't enforce the laws that you got,
Exactly, that's
that
what I'm
could have
saying.
solved the issue, then, like, that's your first problem.
And
That is the first problem that should have been addressed. You didn't adhere and enforce the laws that you had that could have stopped this in
yeah,
the first place. Um,
and now you know that the bureaucracies, the public services in place are meant to be there to protect you from this sort of stuff. And then, because they can't put their hands up, like they tried with the gun laws, saying, that that happened because of the guns, but everyone with their good bullshit detectors knows that's not true.
mm,
And and as you said, even Johnny Howard agreed. And it makes you wonder. So inside these services, these intelligence agencies, if they're not spending 100% of their time making us safe, and they're not spending 100% of the money that we give them on making us safe, then what are they doing in those agencies? Like, is it every paranoid, raging right winger's nightmare where they're spending time on DI workshops instead of, getting better intelligence, because it's within the realms of possibility. I've worked in the public, so I've seen it. I've
Mm.
seen distraction. I've seen waste. I've seen resources allocated that are just
Yeah.
throwing money in the wood chipper when society is expecting you to be keeping them safe all the time. And and then something like this happens, no one takes accountability, no changes are made,
Mm.
and you just go external. You just blame
Yeah.
external. And then,
It's easier to blame external. That's and that's
yeah,
and that's it. It's lazy. It's lazy politics and it's lazy legislation,
yeah,
legislating, and that's what we've seen at the state level, and now that's what we've
yeah.
seen at the federal level as well.
And then what's even worse is at the point of after the crisis, or after the situation when you're in crisis, then those agencies that everyone agrees, you know, made those mistakes, dropped the ball, and you're not holding them accountable, you then only call on them to help you write laws to fix it.
Yeah.
So the people that made the mistake, you're asking them, can you help us fix the mistakes? And then none of the new legislation fixes their mistakes.
No.
It just simply goes to somebody else. So this is, it makes you think this is going to happen again, you know, like
Well,
this.
would we? They should have fixed the mistakes after Edwards.
Yeah,
They should have held people
exactly.
accountable after John Edwards. Um,
But that didn't have the same spotlight as it has now. That's
No,
the
it
thing.
it it didn't, but it still had a decent spotlight on it, and when a coronial inquiry clearly points out failings of the
Yeah,
firearms registry and nothing is done to help hold them accountable for those mistakes,
yeah,
you know, they will continue to make mistakes.
yeah,
If people aren't essentially punished for want of a better word,
mm,
for making a mistake,
mm,
they will keep making mistakes because they got away with it.
yeah,
It's just simple,
yeah.
behavioral psychology. Um,
I remember working for the Justice Department, and on the back of some internal decisions that were made, like procedural decisions that were made, and terrible things happening, they passed new legislation in New South Wales that meant the bureaucracy working within that department, that service, if your decision making or your process is found to be at fault, or something wrong, or something was missed at the point, and then that down the chain, or over the course of time, could be correlated to something catastrophic
mm,
happening, they'd change legislation so you could be found personally criminally negligible, which I thought was a great step, because
mhm.
that means if you're doing, because we are all people, we all hate Mondays. We all want to go home early on Fridays. We all think we're working too hard. So it's, at the end of the day, it is people in these roles. It's, if you're running late for lunch, or you're, worried about the trip on the weekend, and you're just rushing through those last bit of risk assessments, or, you know, home visits or whatever, and you miss something, saying, I missed that, sorry, is not good enough if it results in the death of someone,
No, not
or
at
it
all.
results in a serious life altering um, situation that someone else gets in as a result of you rushing an assessment, or not calling that person, or not following up on that lead, or whatever. And I thought that was a fantastic move that they did that. They're the kind of reforms I think we need to have,
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
people in these decision making roles, they're big decisions. Um, they're big, like allowing someone a firearms license is a responsibility. And if you're the person that signs that off, you should have done things properly, because society trusts you to do it properly. And if you're not doing it properly, then you should be able to be held
Mm,
accountable criminally. That's not unreasonable. If you don't want that kind of accountability, don't take that job, especially in the public service. It's not, oh, this is a cushy government job. You should be in that job for the right
mm.
reasons, not because it's easy, not because of the perks. You should be in it because you want to give back to the public. You want to serve the public. So you want to serve them in those right ways. I realize I'm getting on a high horse here,
No,
but
no, but I totally agree with you, and that's why we're looking at legislation to that effect.
yeah,
Because the registry has fucked up too many times,
yeah.
and not be held accountable on any of those occasions. That something needs to change
And
because
people, yeah,
firearm owners can't keep copping it in the neck
yeah,
for their mistakes and their
yeah,
incompetence.
yeah,
That's just the harsh reality.
yeah,
It it isn't staffed by competent people. It needs to be moved out of the cushy beach lifestyle suburbs that it's in its
Yeah.
hidden location in the Northern
Yeah.
Rivers. It needs to be moved back to Sydney, staffed with competent people
Yep.
and staffed with people that frankly don't have a biased opinion around
Yeah.
firearms. I can
What
I
did we
can
hear last year about
I
their Christmas party? What did we hear about that?
Yeah, well, the Firearms Registry actually invited Walter Mikak to an anniversary event
Yeah.
up to the registry. And we are investigating as to whether he was actually paid for that role. But that's a slap in the face to every club and
Yeah.
association that has actually sat on advisory councils with the registry that they didn't even have the decency to invite them.
Yeah.
They put in hours and hours of work unpaid to try and advise the registry about sensible
Yep.
processes and sensible
Yep.
regulations and sensible legislation, and they didn't even get an invite. But you invite Walter Mikak,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
clearly has a biased opinion around firearms.
Yep.
And as someone that has lost kids to firearms, I don't understand why he would have that view.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that his view is the correct one.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it just,
so
it looks like hostility towards the group you're regulating.
Well, that's right,
which is never how it should be. You shouldn't.
no.
You,
And look,
you shouldn't say I'm a hater of what you do, and at the same time I'm regulating you.
No, and I can also tell you anecdotal stories around how Sue Higginson once told me that some of her friends worked at the Firearms Registry.
Yeah.
So, what do you?
Yeah.
We know Sue Higginson's opinion on firearms. What do you think your friends' opinions on firearms are? And is that right?
Yeah.
There's clearly when there'd be a clear bias.
Yeah.
So get the registry out of that location, staff it with competent people, staff it with people that don't have a bias, staff it with people that actually know something about firearms.
Well, it's staff it with people that are professional.
Yeah.
So when you're professional, you have to separate your own personal politics.
Yeah.
And stacking it with people that are hostile towards and getting speakers who are hostile towards the very thing you're regulating is not professional.
No, not at all.
It's the antithesis of professionalism.
Yeah.
It's the antithesis of what people expect.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately the stories keep coming out. Unfortunately, we keep hearing more and more stories like that. And it's, again, the wider public, because we're not criminals. That's the point. So you should not be treating us like criminals. In fact, I can tell you people that work with criminals are way more professional than the stories that you hear coming out of the Firearms Registry with stories like what you just said.
Yeah.
People that work in probation and parole are not like that towards criminals.
Yeah.
They're not mean. They're not over the top. They don't bring in people that hate crims. They even call them crims. They don't even use the word crim because it's too insensitive. So, so hearing those things about the Firearms Registry, it's just, it's terrible. It's terrible. And then we end up in a situation like this. And then again, the people that they don't like, they're going to keep giving it to them. And just speaking more about process and about things where they drop the ball, we've been talking about for over 15 years about how they don't secure their data properly because police aren't good administrators when it comes to that. So for example, when you get your safe visit, when you get your home visit, the police may come with a piece of paper with your details on it. That piece of paper is not tracked from their internal network. They have secure databases, but they don't attend your home with an iPad or with a computer. They may attend with a piece of paper. So that is information copy and pasted or taken down off the database. And when they come and visit you, serial numbers, names, addresses, number of firearms, maybe have your photo on it. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they bring all that information. Yeah. They don't sign out that information. Yeah. They don't sign that information back in. There's no one watching them, what they're doing. That is secure data that is then leaves that process by being put into a Word document and printed. And who knows what happens to that document afterwards.
In the past, I know of cases where that paper has gone walkabout, my understanding through accident, like being blown away, like in the wind as they're leaving, and it's just like, oh well.
Yeah. But the dog ate my breakfast is not good enough when we've all heard anecdotal evidence of as soon as someone with a big collection got inspected, he got robbed straight away. So, like your money doesn't blow its way into the poker machine to gamble It has to be put there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't blow its way into the hands of people to rob you. It has to be given.
Yeah.
We know that. And it could be anything, because a photo of that could be taken and sent. We don't know. And, this is not an exercise in bashing police. This is us saying police shouldn't be involved. That's an important thing to say. We're not bashing police here, but police shouldn't be involved. And the way that they're doing it is not professional.
No.
They're not administrators. They want to catch criminals.
Yeah.
Most of the cops that come to you, they're relaxed. They don't see you as a criminal.
No.
But they're lumped with this. So this is what we end up. This is a symptom of that setup.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to jump over to where we are now federally in terms of federal? Do you want to talk federal legislation?
Yes, federally. So we obviously. So just quickly going back to the New South Wales Parliament thing, it was shocking how quickly the Liberals just fell in line, and people found that there is a uniparty. So now they fall in line together. They do what they're told, and then they just do it. And then the Nationals were relatively dragged kicking and screaming into opposing it.
Yeah.
But they didn't make any noise, because they're a lot stronger in New South Wales. They didn't make any noise about this could end our coalition. It was just, you vote for it, it'll sail through, and we'll be the ones that stand there and we'll be against it.
Yeah.
So they get to do their yelling and their screaming, but they know full well it makes absolutely no difference. This legislation is still passing. They could have flexed their muscle with the especially in the upper house. They could have flexed their muscle with the Liberal Party and told them, if you guys do this, you're directly attacking our constituents, and we're not going to stand for that. Like we just saw in the feds, how they just said, well, we can't, this is untenable now.
Yeah.
So we're out of here.
You should have seen that, but I guess I think people are now probably saying is, no matter what, I guess, side of the uni party you support to be in government, whoever the other side is, they need to be a strong opposition. Otherwise, democracy doesn't work.
Yeah. And we don't have one, and that's why the polls are changing.
We don't have one. And as I said in the chamber, to the Liberals, you don't need to be bipartisan on shit legislation.
Yeah.
Like, if it's shit, you oppose it.
Yeah.
You amend it. You don't just go along with it because you're concerned about the optics.
Because that's important. There were no amendments that passed. Not a single one.
No, look, I think there was one that passed, which was a pretty bloody obvious one. Like, if you're on an ASIO watch list, you shouldn't get a firearms license. Well, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
But
you shouldn't already.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't already. Like, you shouldn't need legislation to say that. And this is part of the problem with the federal legislation. You don't need federal legislation for someone from ASIO to pick up the phone to the state police commissioner and say, hey,
100%.
You've got a terrorist in your state and we're watching him. Maybe you should watch him too.
Yeah. Yeah. So shifting to the feds.
Yeah.
So they obviously had their law, their legislation. What did they have? A 4-day inquiry? It was a snap inquiry.
Not even that. It was just a show.
And then they changed
a show trial, really.
And then they changed the bills anyway.
Yeah.
Like after the inquiry for that bill,
they had to change.
They changed the bill anyway.
They had to change the hate speech part of the bill anyway, because they weren't going to get the Green support to get it passed.
Yeah.
So that's why that happened. The firearm stuff largely remained untouched or unchanged, because they knew they had the weak Liberal support in it, so they didn't need to negotiate. They didn't need to try and come up with amendments that would appease, the Liberals or the Nationals or anything. They could just ram it through like they did with the state legislation. So, and all the bullshit arguments and gaslighting from federal Labor members, where they bring in Dan Repicoli and go, oh, look, here we got an Olympic pistol shooter, and he says it's not going to impact law-abiding firearm owners. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Read the legislation.
And him telling us to calm down.
No, I know what happens at the state level with opposition and government backbenchers. They get the highlights reel like we do, and they're too bloody lazy to read the bill.
Well, and
they don't understand the detail. So,
and they're scared too.
Yeah. Crossing the floor
would be the end of
their career.
Yeah.
And to come out and say that this bill doesn't affect law-abiding firearm owners and it's just targeting import bans and You don't need to worry about it. You just still look at stuff online and you'll be right.
Yeah.
Um, is just gaslighting firearm owners.
Yeah.
Um,
In the worst possible way.
in the worst possible way, because it's been done by someone that should have had our back.
Yep.
Um,
Someone who's voting for it saying this is fine when
yeah,
you're, don't trust your own lying
no,
eyes.
and
Trust me.
yeah, and there's
Yeah.
there's probably 10,000 law-abiding firearm owners in his electorate
Mm.
that probably let's be honest, probably voted for him simply because, and probably voted for Labor in that seat simply
Yep.
because, well, it was a pistol he's an Olympic pistol shooter.
Yep.
He should be okay to
Yep.
represent us. So he probably got over the line on the law-abiding firearm owner
And
vote in his electorate,
yeah.
and that's what he does with it.
And then again, he's just a person as well. So
Yeah.
it's within the realms of possibility that he didn't check the legislation, as you said, as a backbencher.
Yeah.
He'd get the highlights.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have read the bill properly. And then based on whoever his advice has come from, rather than checking for himself
Yeah.
and doing his own due diligence.
And it's important, I think, when you read particularly federal legislation, you need, or any legislation, you need to read it in context with other legislation it references.
Yes.
And
Because a lot of this is getting played out in the States.
yes, and we'll probably get to that. I guess we might as well get to it now.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Like there are parts of the federal legislation and that have caused a bit of conjecture and debate as to whether, we are protected or we aren't protected. And this is really to do with Part 7, which is offences relating to the use of carriage services for firearms and explosive manufacturing material. You need to read it in conjunction with the state legislation.
Yeah.
And what it actually says when it relates to, offences where you would use a carriage service, so the internet or your phone, to look up information around firearms and explosives, manufactured material. It talks about you having a defense if you're in the course of your business, so an armorer, a gunsmith, a dealer, you have a defense against this offense. You're not exempt, you have a defense. So what that means is you have to defend yourself in court.
Yeah.
Now, normally you would say, okay, innocent until proven guilty. Not with this legislation.
No.
The legislation actually reverses the burden of proof, and you are now guilty, assumed guilty, and you have to prove yourself innocent. So the process becomes part of the punishment in this legislation.
So let's get into that. Let's get into that. So what page are we on here, Chris? We're on page 90. Can we go to I think it's page 80?
Oh, it's 90 in the PDF, but 80.
Oh, sorry. So scroll back
The liability offense.
to the actual offense itself. So not the defenses. Let's go to the part we're talking about first. So scroll up a little bit. Okay, so this is Schedule 2, Part 7, 474.45H. So this is the federal bill, the firearms bill. Possessing or controlling firearms and explosives manufactured material obtained or accessed using a carriage service. So that means using your phone, using the internet, because they are the jurisdiction of the feds.
Yeah.
So a person commits offence if A, a person has possession or control of material, and B, the material is in the form of data held in a computer or contained in a data storage device, again, phone. C, the person has used a carriage service to obtain or access the material. So carriage service also includes the mail and things like that too, by the way. And D, the material is firearms and explosives manufacture material.
Yeah. And it's important at this point to...
So penalty?
But it's important at this point to explain to people that at the end of every one of those clauses, there is a and.
Yeah.
Not an or, an and.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing when you're reading legislation, as I do day in, day out, and so does everyone that works in my office, one word can change.
Makes all the difference.
Can change everything, can make all the difference. And in this case, it does. And that's what a lot of the conjecture and debate has missed when looking at this legislation. So it says and. And yes, the penalty for this is imprisonment for 5 years.
Yeah.
Not maximum sentence is 5 years straight imprisonment, 5 years done.
Yep.
That's what needs to be considered. That's what you need to be considered. So the burden of proof is reversed. You're guilty, and you have to prove yourself innocent, and it's imprisonment for 5 years, and you have to show, and it's all these things.
Yeah.
You've had possession of the material. It's in the form of data held in a computer contained in a data storage device. So it's on your computer. You've actually used a carriage service to obtain that material, and the material is related to firearms and explosive manufacturing material. And at this point, we need to explain that the definitions of what is firearms and explosive manufacturing material is very broad in this legislation. So effectively, everything is in until it is carved out in regulations. And that is the problem here. Everything is in until it is carved out.
So let's keep reading. So to avoid doubt, the following fault elements for the physical elements of an offence against the subsection 1 are A, intention of fault element for the conduct referred to in paragraph 1A. That's recklessness is the fault element for the circumstance referred to in paragraph 1D. So recklessness is the only is still a fault, and then strict liability applies paragraph 1A, 1B. Absolute liability applies in 1C.
Well, let's just I'll stop there. Most people, average punter, doesn't understand what strict liability and absolute liability means. So strict liability essentially means that there can be an element of an argument or defence in that you may have made a mistake in committing that act.
Yes.
So in terms of strict liability, that applies to paragraph B. So you can, in paragraph B, where it says the material is in the form of data held in a computer or obtained in a data storage device, you can say, well, that may have been a mistake that it ended up on my computer. I may have accidentally downloaded it.
Or like a WhatsApp chat or something you automatically download.
So, but you still have to prove that in court, and you are still presumed guilty until you prove yourself innocent.
And we're coming to that here. So,
and the next part, absolute liability, which applies to 1C, where it says the person used the carriage service to obtain or access material. Absolute liability basically means there is no argument about, you can't run an argument that you made a mistake or whoops-a-daisy, it's an accident. It is presumed, you have it there.
Like having child abuse material, for example.
You have it there, you're guilty.
Yes.
And you have to defend yourself. And it should be noted, for the average punter, normally absolute liability is applied for largely minor offences and administrative offences. It's not unheard of to be applied to more serious offences, but it is rare, in terms of legal legislation.
And that's what it talks about in part 5, where it says, if the prosecution proves beyond a reasonable doubt matters mentioned in paragraphs 1A, B, and D, then it is presumed, unless the person proves to the contrary, that the person obtain access to the material, use carriage service to obtain or access the material. Now, it says, that doesn't include C, as you said, because absolute liability applies. And then the note at the bottom of that says a defendant bears a legal burden in relation to the matters in this subsection. So even though it's not absolute, you still have the burden of proof.
Yes.
Yeah, on your side.
Yeah. So
even though it says they have to, it notes that the defendant still bears the burden of proof.
So if you go back to, if we now go look at the defences, and a business owner, so a dealer, an armourer, a gunsmith.
So let's read that too.
So they have a defence.
Yeah. So let's read that too.
Yeah. But if we go back to, just before we do that, if you go to the note, a defender bears a legal burden. So all those things about absolute and strict liability still apply to this person, business owner, that may have a defence. And in this case, a business owner may have a defence, but in terms of absolute and strict liability, absolute liability, they don't have a defence.
Yeah.
So it's a defence you're having when you don't have a defence.
Yep. And let's read through that, because this is where the constant overlap and the constant contradiction keeps coming.
Yes.
So now in In the next section, 474.45J, defences in respect to firearms and explosives manufacturing material, state or territory licenses or permits. So in subsection 474.45G and 474.45H, does not apply when engaging in the conduct by a person in relation to material if either the person is the business owner and carries on a business in relation to firearms, firearms accessories, firearm parts or firearm magazines, explosive or other lethal devices, to the person, or whatever. The person performs work of such of a business and the business owner holds a license or permit, however described. That was granted by a state or territory in an authority. It was granted by a state or a territory or an authority of a state or a territory, and that authorizes the manufacture, repair, maintenance, modification of those firearms, firearm accessories, firearm parts, firearm magazines or explosives or other lethal devices. 3, that it is in force. And then C, that material relates to those firearms, firearm accessories, firearm parts, firearm magazines or explosives or other lethal devices. And D, the conduct is in connection with the carrying of that business. Now, there's another note there again that the defendant, so even again, they're reiterating, the defendant bears an evidential burden in relation to these matters in this subsection, and it relates to subsection 13.33.
Yeah. So even though you have you say you can be a business owner, you can be a dealer, you can be a gunsmith, you're an armourer, and under this legislation, even though you are performing duties that you are legally allowed to do in your state, a police officer could still say that you have committed an offence and you bear the burden of proving that you are innocent.
Yes. So what does that look like in real world examples? So if they because right now we have no regulations, so this is all question marks, these are all hypotheticals. There's a hypothetical where some gun dealer sharing some kind of, because go up again for us, Chris, about the original used carriage service offence. So the matters that authorize repair, maintenance, manufacture, modification of firearms. Oh no, we're in the defence, aren't we? Go up. The offence itself. A person commits offence if has possession of, control of, whatever. So they could essentially make your gun shop Facebook page a crime scene overnight, because you've talked about people talk about the benefits of Picatinny rails versus standard scope mounts. Adding torches, adding all kinds of things to your firearm, bipods. So while the current legislation talks about you're not modifying firearms into different categories, that's what New South Wales legislation says, that then you can maintain whatever your firearm. The feds don't mention any of that it's in line with your state or territory. It simply says federally is an offence to modify firearms. It doesn't mention modifying them into different categories or changing serial numbers. It gets into no detail. It's so broad that it's scary.
Yeah.
So a real world detail could be, as you say, there could be overreach where they say to a gun shop or to an organization that does how-to videos, or let's say the sporting shooter has videos on reloading or something like that, or on, because they do lots and lots of rifle reviews.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things, that is now something we're going to choose to go after you on. Then the burden of proof is on you to prove otherwise. So they can charge first and essentially go through the process later. And what that means is, in the meantime, you're destroyed. Because now under the current New South Wales legislation, whether it's a private citizen or whatever, if they go after that person, that business owner, that individual license owner, and they can cite these laws, because these laws will be played out in New South Wales court, then you lose your gun license, or your license is suspended, guns are confiscated, and then you come to apply for your license again or get it back. And if they say no, under the New South Wales laws, you have no right of appeal. So you can't go to an NCAT inquiry to get that back. So this is a very scary way that there could be mass license losses, mass gun confiscations, because you have no right of appeal unless you go to Supreme Court.
And if I take you back to the point I was making, that the definition of what is a firearm or explosive manufactured material, it is so broad that everything is in until it is carved out.
Exactly.
So effectively, even a club having the government designed and approved firearm safety training manual on their website for download for potential applicants to study, could be seen as
That is a scenario.
as an offence.
That
So
is a scenario.
until we see regulations that carve things out,
Yep.
this legislation is very poorly drafted and actually captures everything.
Yep.
Everything is in until things are
Yep.
carved out, and that's also the problem with the state legislation. A lot of things are in until they are carved out, and it's going to be our job to essentially try and carve some of this out so it is not so broad and reaching. So if you know, if
So
the
the
member
question,
if the member for Hunter had actually read this, you know, honestly, he would have made the same conclusions
yeah,
that we have. He couldn't honestly stand up and say this doesn't potentially
yeah.
have an impact on law-abiding firearm owners.
So now we have a scenario where the question marks continue because those laws did pass New South Wales Parliament, and we now have basically gun limits placed. They are in law, but it hasn't been officially executed because how they're actually going to play that out, they don't know.
Yeah.
Because they didn't consult first, because they didn't have regulations to go with their legislation, they're doing it all in reverse. So as we know now, the firearms regulations aren't due until the end of this year, October, I think.
Yeah.
They've been talking about them for a while, but they're not due till the end of this year. So we have a situation where the police have New South Wales bill, they have the federal bill. We're all going to get played out in the New South Wales justice system.
Yes.
They can basically draft regulations on that however they want. So we're ending up in a very strange scenario where the police are meant to be at the very end of the democratic process, where they have nothing to do with influencing legislation. We now have a viable scenario where the police are going to decide, because the legislation is so broad, whether to go hard or not. So the police are going to decide how this legislation is actually enforced, which is not at all what people vote for.
And Chris, can we just scroll back down to the defences? Because obviously there's the defence for the business owners. So the
word "and" that you were talking about.
Yeah, the gunsmiths, the dealers, the armourers. If we scroll a bit further down, keep going till we get to just so this is clause number 2. So it says subsection 474.45 GI or 474.45 HI doesn't apply to engaging in conduct by a person in relation to material if A, the person holds a license or permit, I, that was granted by a state or territory or an authority of a state or territory, and
that's the word. It's not and or, it's and
this is the clincher, that authorises the manufacture, repair, maintenance, or modifications of firearms, firearms accessories, firearm parts, firearm magazines, or explosives or other lethal devices, and that is in force.
That's current.
And B, the material relates to those firearms, firearms accessories, firearm parts, firearm magazines, or explosives or other lethal devices. Now, if you look at II, in New South, so it's referring to New South Wales legislation here.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about New South Wales because that's where we are. Each individual state will need to look at their own legislation when they look at this. In New South Wales, legislation around what and regulation about what you can and can't do as a general license holder is either vague or silent in terms of when it talks about repairing and modifying your firearm. It is vague or silent. It is not clear as to whether, under even existing New South Wales legislation, as to whether mounting an optic sight or adjusting your trigger is something that a general licensed firearm owner can do, or it is substantive enough that it has to be done by the business owner, which is the dealer, the armourer, or the gunsmith. And when legislation is vague or it's silent, it is then left up to the discretion of a court or a decision maker, i.e. the commissioner, as to decide whether you have adhered to the law or not.
Yeah. And
that then becomes another capture point for firearm owners, because it's something that they've, let's be frank, many firearm owners just fit their own scopes. It's not hard to do. And it's essentially a bit of a grey area in the law as to whether you can or can't do it. It's something that's never really been enforced.
Yep.
Because obviously
because generally they say if it doesn't move it across categories, then it's okay. But now you have such a broad federal law that it's possible now that they can use these new laws to get a lot broader if they want.
Yeah.
So in New South Wales, technically right now, unless you're altering your firearm across categories, you're okay. And scopes are technically gun parts, but this doesn't have any of that clarity in that.
Yeah, but the New South Wales legislation is actually unclear as to whether adding an optic sight is considered substantive enough or not to be considered as modifying a firearm to be done by a gunsmith or an armourer or a dealer. That is the problem. That would have to be decided in court. So you would have to essentially, and there's a note here, a defender bears the evidential burden again in this subsection. So once again, you are presumed guilty of it.
Yeah.
And you would have to prove that in court. Not only did you do it or not do it, you would also have to then prove that you adding a scope or adjusting your trigger is something that is not substantive enough that should be done by a dealer or an armourer or a gunsmith.
And then in that scenario, if you're Joe Blow from Dapto, who they decide to make an example out of you, and you're just a normal firearms owner, and they decide to charge you with this, they'll take your guns, they'll suspend your license, they'll charge you, you go to court, you win, and then you have no right of appeal anymore in New South Wales because NCAT's gone. So you need to go to the Supreme Court to do that. And what regular firearms owner is going to be able to do that?
Well, that's
the point.
Yeah, that is exactly
that's the point.
It is applying essentially a firearms lawyer explained it to me the other day. It is essentially applying, getting rid of NCAT. And look, NCAT has had its problems, and we can talk about them at another time or later. But it is by removing NCAT, you're essentially elevating the appeal of an administrative decision to a court that often will deal with appeals on a criminal nature.
Yes.
So you're getting rid of an administrative appeal and replacing it with essentially a criminal appeal.
Yes. Which is not supposed to be its jurisdiction.
No, not at all. Yeah. So there's obviously problems with that as well.
So that's what's scary about this, because we don't have a timeline for regulations. They've been pretty quiet in New South Wales because I guess everyone's getting back to work or whatever, but we don't know what the regulations are going to look like. No. I don't think, because there was no consultation, I don't think the government has realized that either.
No.
That now they're going to have to fix, or now they're going to have to consult now.
Yeah.
And how the hell can they put the toothpaste back in the tube with some of this?
Yeah.
And if the police are the ones that they're listening to, the police are going to do whatever makes life easier for them because they're in charge of the registry, they're in charge of the inspecting. So they have, it's a normal business driven agenda, which is they need to make their job easier, they need to make their job safer, more efficient. So less firearms makes that easier. We know they've talked about, just for firearms, they've talked about safe checks before you get your license. Before you get your safe storage address approved. In some other states, they're already doing video checks.
In New South Wales, they're doing video checks.
Yeah, which is already scary, because you can have if they're not coming to your house and they're not actually looking at things, you could have an ISIS flag flying on the front lawn, and then they video talk to you, and then you're
there's no rigor in it.
No, there's absolutely no rigor in it.
Yeah.
So if they're moving to the approach that they're talking about, the money that they're talking about having to pump into this, they're not going to be able to do it.
No,
it's not possible.
No.
So the only thing is, in these regulations, are they going to have to make it too hard? So people are going to have to drop off their licenses. People are going to have to lose their licenses. They're going to have to give it up. Businesses are going to have to close, because that will make things easier for them. And again, it's on the back of their mistakes.
Yeah.
So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we're going to see extremely harsh regulations, because they've now got carte blanche and they've got two sets of bills to work with that are so broad and so non-specific that they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And right now, do we think in the parliament anyone's going to make any amendments to the legislation that's just gone through.
No.
If they go too far to give specifics in the bills, I don't think so.
No. Well, we tried.
Yeah.
Obviously, 60 or 70 times. And
but what I'm saying is that all these egos combined going to say, you know what, we need to readdress this legislation and fix it, or are they just going to go nuts on the regulations?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I guess the message to people is disregard the gaslighting that you've heard from a federal member about how this doesn't impact firearm owners, because it does. As it stands, until we see the regulations and until we can potentially get some sensible things put in the regulations that carve things out, everything is in.
Yeah.
Exactly. I would say if you're not from New South Wales, you should you should review your own state legislation in terms of what you are actually allowed to do on your general license in terms of modifying or repairing your firearm. If it's not explicit in terms of what you can and can't do, then you are potentially captured under this federal legislation, unless it is carved out in the regulations at a state or a federal level. That is the problem. You can't sit here, or people can't sit online and say, "I know you're not going to be impacted as a law-abiding firearm owner." Cut the BS. When clearly it is so broad that you can be. Everything is in until it is carved out in the regs.
Yep.
That is plain to see as it's written and interpreted in plain English. And this is not just me saying that. You and I have had discussions with barristers who have drawn the same conclusions as we have in terms of how it is read and how it is interpreted. So I think that's important for people to understand, to cut through the noise of people saying, no, it's all right. It was you've essentially got an exemption if you have a license. Read the second part. That says and.
It says and. It doesn't say or.
Does that license authorize you to do those things? If it's not explicit in your state legislation, you could be captured by this. That is what everyone needs to understand. Until we can see the regulation, you potentially are captured.
So we've also got the horrific scenario now as well, where protesting, there's a huge clampdown on protests. So marching in the streets is something that we just can't do. So what can we do now? And that is, you can do exactly what we're doing. We're making sure we're ready to go. We're finding the right people. We're raising money so we can go after these people. We can go after them at the ballot box, and we can get the right kind of people who understand the reality of what's going on. Because at the end of the day, we all know these politicians that wave this through are both parties. None of them are your friends. None of them, even the ones that are from the firearms world, are not your friends. At the end of the day, they're going to fall back on whatever their bosses say. So getting organised, getting people together in your area, talking about ramifications for you. If you want to be a political candidate, stick your hand up.
Unless a person stands at a pedestal representing SFF, they are not friends of firearm owners. They might be fair weather friends, in some times. But do they fully understand it? Do they fully get the culture? Will they stand staunch against firearm legislation that hurts firearm owners? The answer is clearly no.
Well, that's the thing.
And so that's why it is important to have people, as many people representing SFF come the 2027 state election.
Well, we're the only ones who will die in a ditch on things like this. And we saw that in Parliament.
Other people dropped off. They got tired. Oh, I'm going home.
They get up there and they film their little 2-minute clip so they can share it on their social media. But none of them really give a toss at the end of the day. You're a peripheral issue for them.
No.
And now you've been genuinely scapegoated. This is our generation's Port Arthur. So now we know how it feels when you get treated this way, when you did nothing wrong.
And there'll be people that would get up, and not just shooting, but also fishing as well. The amount of times people would get up and go, we used to have a farm and we used to have guns. And trying to be relatable.
On a farm doing that,
I grew up
so
on a farm.
understand.
Yeah, so I understand. blah, 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 but I'm going to vote, for the bill, blah,
Yeah.
blah, etc. Or that, we always used to fish, growing up, I used to go fishing, and now I can't catch a fish anymore, so we need marine parks. No, you're just a shit fisherman.
Yeah.
And you don't stand for fishermen. Just because you may have thrown a line once time, or you may have been on a farm once, and a distant relative might have firearms, does not mean that you represent firearm owners or you
Yeah.
represent fishermen. That's just bullshit.
Yeah.
The only ones that represent those people, unequivocally, is us.
Yeah. So we've got legislation, we've got state and federal legislation, but we have no regulation.
Yes.
So we don't know what's going to happen at the end of all this. But if you've got an MP and you're a firearms owner, and that's what you care the most about, is having your own guns and having them for your future generations, because you're someone who does the right thing, and you've always done the right thing. That's why you've still got them. And you've got an MP who has given you some bullshit answer, like the rest of us got when we emailed them or we rang their offices, whatever their bosses told them to say, and they're not looking out for you, and they're not directly, and there's someone that voted for this legislation, then you need to be organising in your area. You need to be sticking your hand up. You need to be looking at a candidate from the shooters, fishers and farmers, someone in your area that directly supports firearms. It is not going to be an apologist for these kind of laws. I voted for them because there was some other element that I needed to, or whatever. So that's what we need. We need you. We need your help. We need to get together. We know if there was any other group that had around 800,000 people that was scapegoated like this, it would be called all the worst kinds of things. Racist, marginalizing people, dehumanizing people. But because it's us, we're just used to it and we just keep copying it. We need to get together. We need to galvanize properly, come together as a community, and we need to show them at the next election just what happens when they scapegoat us like this and they don't fix their own problems.
I think we might leave it there.
I think we might have started to get fired up because it's really annoying me.
I can see your blood pressure levels rising.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's obviously tons of question marks. We're all feeling the same anxiety, and this is not how it should be at the start of the year. Going with fresh eyes, going into Australia Day, for goodness.
No.
And this is what we're all thinking about.
Your answers actually, essentially hang on the regulations. That's the message. And that's where all the answers will lie. So that's what we need to be working towards as our first fight. And then the next fight after that is the 2027 state election. And
look, a lot of clubs are doing it right now. A lot of clubs and ranges are coming together because we all live our separate lives. And then when we come together for our meets or for our shoots or whatever, get around other firearms owners. Don't be anxious on your own. Get together with your club, with whoever it is. Get up there and ask the questions to your presidents. We're all feeling the same anxiety. We all have the same question marks hanging over our heads, but support each other. Look after yourself. Look after each other. Getting too wound up about things, attacking politicians personally is exactly what they want right now. You've been doing the right thing for so long, and then they've done this to you and they're expecting a reaction. So go by things the right way. Do some research for yourself. Look at ways you can insulate yourself. Look at ways you can insulate your club. Look at ways in the current situation, the way they are, all the new hoops they've set up. Look at the way you can jump through those hoops lawfully, properly and processionally, and just, do the right thing. Keep level heads. And as soon as we know more, we'll be letting you guys know. We'll be briefing you guys. We'll be showing you what your options are. We'll be pointing you in the right direction.
All right. That was the real goodbye. Before that was just the the car park goodbye. We're done.
We're done. All right, guys. See you next time. So that's it, folks, for this episode. Thanks for listening, following on. A lot there to digest, I know. But now we've got to get organised. We've got to get together. And we've got to get things in place to get our freedoms back. Hope you had a good time. Hope you learned a few things. We'll catch you on the next one. See you around.